So if this is your first webinar in the series, thanks for joining in. This is the third in a series of 4. So next week will be the concluding webinar. All of these webinars are being recorded, and so you get them each week in terms of the link via email. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar or at the end of it, or both, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A or chat box. And also, if it's a pressing matter and you want your ability to say it out loud is much quicker than your ability to type it, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask the question. All right, so webinar 3 is on marketing, specifically positively differentiating your childcare business in a COVID-19 world. So just as busy perhaps as this picture of the word marketing is really what's going on in marketing right now in general, in terms of understanding what consumers want and perhaps more appropriately what they need so that you can fill in those gaps. But also is really how busy parents in particular are, and how busy they are leads to really not having the time or energy to commit to searches for your services. One of the things that is abundantly clear to many parents right now, and I include myself in that grouping, is that even though there is a pressing need, perhaps more so now than previously, for childcare services, there's also a ton of information to sift through, to really parse through and understand, to come to a realization of whether you found a childcare provider who is, just what you need and want, or if, out of a sea of 100 providers in your local area, nobody has really what you need, or perhaps nobody has what you need, at least as they articulate it through their various communications, whether in traditional print media, so in flyers, or in social media online. So our agenda is fourfold. Really, the foundation of this webinar is really showing you and evangelizing to you, to use that term, how social media can help immensely as you seek to increase the number of families that you serve, as well as retain the ones that you currently serve. So the bulk of it initially is going to be a look at childcare platforms, and I've selected 3 in particular. And we're actually going to, make this an interactive webinar where I will be doing demonstrations of these childcare platforms. Some of you all may have accounts with some of these or all of these. Others may not have heard of them. As I will mention later on, neither Pathstone nor Architect are recommending these platforms per se, but we want to put the information out there as to how you can use these platforms, the benefits, the potential disadvantages if you don't know how to optimize your input, and you will get to see for yourself what are likely options that will help you on your journey. So childcare platforms, effectively conveying your public health conscious differentiators. So perhaps more than anything right now, the biggest task before you in terms of your marketing strategy and the tactics around those strategies should focus on how you convey information about what you're doing differently in a good way to protect the health and well-being of not only the children in your care or the children you hope to be in your care, but also the personnel that are under your charge, so to speak. Next, I'll move on to community networks and entrepreneurial service providers that can be helpful to you in the context of getting the word out for your services. And then finally, just a more in-focus look at the benefits of membership or subscription to childcare platforms, generally speaking, not necessarily specific to the ones that I will go over today. So, childcare platforms. In many ways, they make the world go round for millions of working parents these days. So what they do, centrally, no pun intended, they provide a centralized online location for parents to find childcare assistance. They allow parents to find childcare providers from various classifications. So there is the element of diversification. You could find childcare providers who are babysitters, nannies, professional childcare providers, as in have a formal business and situation, whether that may be in-home, care-based, or center-based care. You get all of these different options that are centralized in a digital location. So regardless of where somebody may be, in a state, in a city, in the country, whatnot, they could find out information about providers that exist. These platforms facilitate connections between parents and providers. So not only are they a means of finding out information for parents as to what providers exist, but they also facilitate connections by oftentimes having messaging functionality. So you can message parents, parents can message providers to get information on questions they may have. They can ease up the burden on you in terms of keeping track of your financial transactions as a business owner, as many of them facilitate more efficient financial transactions than you can do on your own because they act in a broker capacity. They make the process of parents finding childcare providers, especially in markets where childcare is scarce, much easier and efficient. So this point really zeroes in on what I had mentioned just about a minute or two ago. There is a ton of information being thrown at parents, very little to any time to comb through it and to make sense of it. And childcare platforms make it orders of magnitude easier to find what an individual parent or family unit is looking for. And depending on the platform that you consider putting your services on, they can vet you to varying degrees, which is great because not only do parents know your background and the background of your employees or any personnel, but you can also know as well if you haven't checked up on that recently. And I say that because for those of us in New York State, it is not a continuous background check system, at least not yet. So as I mentioned, childcare platforms have two primary focal points. In-home, so parents' homes, whether you have a system or an arrangement where you are a nanny or an au pair or a babysitter, and it's even if a close professional relationship, it may be more ad hoc than perhaps an established schedule of a daily basis or a weekly basis, etc. And then also center-based care. Now, what you'll find, especially as I dig into some of these platforms, some of these websites, is that some their bread and butter really is making connections or fostering connections between families and babysitters versus families and daycares. So, childcare platform profile creation and demonstration, childcare platform profile creation, demonstration, and exercise. So as I mentioned before, and I have this disclaimer, so I could say that I advised you of this. The demonstrations that are being done for this webinar really are for informational purposes. We are not leading you to any particular childcare platform. If you so decide that you want to put your services on there and optimize them, we are just laying out some options. And specific to my putting this curriculum together, I sought out opportunities to demonstrate childcare platforms that are known as the market leaders in the space. So the three that we'll be going over today are Care.com, Sitter City, and Urban Sitter. So to start off with Care.com, to make this a bit interactive and hopefully you will help me with this, I will be putting out questions to you all, and these questions more likely than not are not rhetorical. So please feel free to answer them so that there really is a dialogue. So of those of you who are familiar with Care.com, how many of you actually list your services on here? Then you could either speak up or you can put your answer in the chat box. Okay. So far I've had one individual say that they do not use it. For those of you who have heard of Care.com, what, and you can answer this in the chat box or again speaking, what have you heard? Have you heard more good things or bad things, and why? Okay, so no response for that, which is fine. We're just getting warmed up. In terms of advantages and disadvantages or fit, to use that term, it runs the gamut between, you know, whether you're a Care.com, whether you are another platform, etc. A lot of this has to do with your individual needs as a business owner. Thank you. I had somebody respond. Thank you for that answer. So one attendee indicated that they have not recommended it to programs. That there is admittedly a mix available of those, and then of course, you know, the penchant to trying to stick to regulated program platforms and referrals. Thank you. So absolutely, you certainly want to stick with what your state licensing agency or authority puts out for you. Oftentimes, increasingly, there is a major disconnect between parents and families in terms of the information that they know exists. Something that parents go to overwhelmingly, more so than perhaps New York State's website, are sites, are platforms like Care.com. So if you are considering marketing your services, because ultimately this is what these sites are, they're marketplaces, two-sided marketplaces. If you are considering marketing your services on these platforms, you want to know what the interface is like. You want to know how you can navigate the platforms relative to other ones to see if there is a good fit among any of these, or if, you know, the needs of your business are such that really it would be more trouble than it's worth. So when you get to the site, immediately see that there are two options. It's a binary, right? The option is, I need a caregiver, so you can start your free search for care in your area, and I want a care job. So if you go here, you could see the various types of services that you can offer. Babysitter or nanny, childcare center, in-home daycare, special needs, senior care and nursing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, for our purposes, we're not focusing on those that are not germane to the care of children, right? So you would focus on a babysitter or nanny, childcare center, in-home daycare. You may also click on special needs, because that would just be representative of an additional filter or layer to whatever differentiating qualities you have as a business. So if you were a childcare center, you would you know, come here to get started. You would, if this is the case, you want to find new customers, you would click on this. You would, again, click on childcare if it's applicable. And as you can see, there's a lot of redundancy. So to the point of redundancy, oftentimes with these platforms, they want to make sure that you are picking precisely what you mean to pick, because if the sign up is incorrect in some form or another, then the marketplace doesn't work as well as it should in terms of providing offerings, publicized offerings for the consumer, for the parents and the families. So if you're a daycare center, they want to know before anything further happens, how soon are you accepting new clients? Is it right now? Is it within a week? Is it within a month? Are you just browsing? For the purpose of this demonstration, we could say just browsing. And then, you know, you could put in your zip code. I will put in, I'll put in 14526. Actually, we'll do 14580. It was on Webster before. And then without going too far, we could say, okay, there are 242 families that are looking for a daycare center near you. So now, to make it easier so that I don't actually have to get my information in the system as a daycare provider, because I am not, I want you to see what it looks like for parents. So they have easy Facebook login, for instance. And so now you can see front and center, they're imploring their users, their parent users, to hire safely. And they say, to help you have a safe experience, we monitor site interactions and do some member screening, but we do not background check all caregivers. So this is something that I just want to bring your attention to for right now, and I'll dig in further, because this is all related to gathering this information and understanding the information that parents can gather about you and that you can gather about yourself, to package it into the right type of language to use for your marketing collateral, your marketing materials. Safety, okay, is at the forefront of every parent's mind, and that's whether COVID exists or does not exist. So in terms of your marketing approach, you want to be mindful of just that. So in my position, it's unavoidable. So I'm going to say got it. So as you can see, what we call the interface is very, you know, pleasing to the eye. It's simple. I don't have to go searching, you know, far and wide for information. I could see these profiles. I could see what is referred to as best match. I could see what I viewed prior. I could see favorites. And then I could see up here on the navigation menu, my caregivers, of which I personally have none. My jobs, so any jobs that I as a parent have posted in search of childcare providers, safety, and messages. Now, admittedly, when I was a new parent, I signed up for care.com, but admittedly have not used it in quite a number of years, because our childcare situation right now extends to family. But in any event, you could look up individuals. Now, what you notice here is that everybody has a picture. You can post not only information such as your biography, a short biography, but you can also see reviews, you can see experience, and you can see availability. Now, one of the things that I will highlight is when you're on these platforms, if you decide to go on them, and if you are offering, you know, center-based care or in-home care, you know, there are nuances, but ultimately, you want to make sure that you're providing all of the relevant information that's not only relevant to, you know, checking the individual check boxes that are required by the state, that are required as a matter of, you know, staying on the right side of the law, so to speak, but also that shine, you know, the best light on you. So this individual, Kate C, has several photographs that show her in different environments. These are things that you want to consider, because you want to consider what types of supplemental information do I provide. If I'm providing photos, are the photos demonstrating me in the best light? Are they demonstrating me in the best light, which speaks to my ability to understand risk? So for instance, am I demonstrating that I have the most recent safe bedding or cribs or whatnot, especially with COVID guidelines. That's something you want to think about with respect to the positioning of children in your care, especially if you are caring for younger children, infants, babies, etc. So you can see her response time, that she has transportation. According to this, she is not CPR trained. She's been hired by 2 families. According to this, she has not had first aid training, or at least we can say that even if she has it, it's not indicated here, as that she's a non-smoker. So the main thing that you want to focus on a platform such as this is not only the layout, if it meets your needs in terms of conveying the information that's important to you and your business, but the scheduling, how you can get payment, what skills that you can mention you have, education, safety information, etc. So care.com has been around a while, about 15, 16 years to be exact, but they're not the only platform available. And care.com is used by, I would have to get you an actual, the actual figure after the fact. And the funny thing is, most of the time I can rattle it off, but right now I can't. But they have millions upon millions of users. So that says something, that a lot of people pay attention to it. But there are also other avenues, such as Sitter City. Now, Sitter City also is a platform that really could be used by any childcare providers. There is a lean, admittedly, towards those who do not provide necessarily regular care to a number of children, whether that's in-home or center-based. But you have similar setups, similar interfaces. A parent looking in can find childcare here, or if you are a sitter, you can indicate that there. They also provide resources for parents. So what you want to look at, in addition to figuring out if any of these childcare platforms work for you, you want to see what types of resources, of which pretty much all platforms are providing these resources, which resources are being publicized, which resources are being provided to parents. Because you want to ensure that the information that's being conveyed and likely being consumed and internalized by prospective clients is actually something that you're up to speed with. So if you recall from last week's webinar, I had gone quite in depth about processes, procedures, documentation of not only what the state or other levels of government are providing as guidelines or directives, but also how you actually implement that information specific to the unique needs and interests of your business and of the families that you serve. And so you want to make sure that not only do you have your own information, but you research what's already on these types of sites and what your prospective clients and current client families are seeing, so that your information can keep pace, so to speak, with what is out there. Urban Sitter is another one. Now, Urban Sitter is perhaps an outlier in the sense that, again, you can find all types of childcare on here, but they do have minimum barriers of entry in terms of background checks. You could also find here, as a parent, again, I'm speaking as a parent, you could find groupings or groups of which you may be a part of, and see who among your social and professional network has used a particular childcare provider. So the beauty of that is, assuming that you have good reviews, you get the benefit of the network, or the social and professional network effect, which makes it a much more efficient process for you to get word out about your services. So in terms of the advantages of childcare platforms, one, I'll start with the safety component. There is the ability to order background checks through the platform and site. Now, as a parent, this is invaluable. And since you work with kids, you know how important it is to demonstrate time and time again that you have a business, have a childcare business specifically, that is a safe environment for families to have their children in your care. Parents and guardians can order background checks on providers they're interested in hiring. And ultimately, you want to make sure that this process is as frictionless as possible. And the term friction really just pertains to, is it easy or is it hard, ridiculously hard to find out basic information about somebody's safety? And I actually am going to go to New York State site in a moment. But ultimately, the question needs to be answered by you. Do you know what your background check looks like, and that of your staff? When was the last time you ran one on yourself and your staff? And are you signed up for continuous checks? So I can't think of any states, of any jurisdictions that actually mandate continuous checks. New York State certainly does not. But increasingly, to meet the very real need and demand from the marketplace by parents to understand exactly the backgrounds of those they are entrusting with their children, there have been platforms developed, technological tools developed to provide continuous checks. And so you could sign up for one of those types of platforms and have the assurity that you get information hot off the press if anything changes with any of your personnel, for instance. There are plenty of childcare provider listings. So as mentioned before, it's about efficiency, and they're relatively easy to use. Nuances exist, of course, as I had mentioned before, but they are relatively easy to use. Now, disadvantages. Most sites do not pre-vet providers before they are listed. And among those that do, they don't deploy rigorous processes to do so. So what you need to consider is, on the one hand, you have the opportunity to possibly be not only on a number of childcare platforms that will get your name and your business out there with the ease of a click for parents, but on the other hand, there's such a sea of information, especially if providers aren't already pre-vetted or pre-vetted to the standard that parents would like, you may get lost in the mix. And so how do you correct for that, or at least how do you anticipate that, so that it's not a means of excluding you? So again, how can you make the process more frictionless for parents to increase their chances of being hired and retained? Okay. So one of the things I wanted to show you before moving on is this survey that had been done, excuse me, a couple of years back, but the survey has held up pretty well, especially internally, based on the survey that we sent out to parents in preparation for this webinar series. So regarding childcare choices, what's important to parents? The childcare deal breakers that this study found were the following. Now, location in a sketchy area, and I'm going to go into that because that term sketchy is loaded and has certain connotations which I believe need to be investigated in order to ensure that all childcare providers can put their best foot forward or feet forward. Gun on premises, other adult staff, other adults who are not staff on premises, unvaccinated children allowed to attend, staff person is a smoker. So in reference to the individual, I believe her name was Kate C, that we saw, her profile, she indicated that she is not a smoker, which for many parents is a wonderful thing, because at least for a third of parents, smoking is a deal breaker. So that's something to consider when you consider, okay, if I am going to be on these platforms, or even if I'm not, when I'm thinking about my marketing materials, my marketing collateral, what are the pain points, so to speak, that parents really want childcare providers to address? What are the things that are deal breakers? What are the things that will put my name and my business's name to the top for consideration? So these are these are findings which are not shocking, really, but which really demand a closer eye to see where you fit in. Okay, disadvantages. just like on the flip side, one of the advantages for these platforms is that there are plenty of options. One of the central disadvantages are that there are plenty of options, that there are precisely too many options really to sift through in an optimized way without assistance. And so this is where you come in with your marketing materials, whether those are materials that are provided via social media communications or in print, etc. You want to help parents do less administrative work than more. If they have to do more administrative work, regardless of whether you're on a platform or not, which is helpful in many ways, you are already starting off behind, so to speak. And information is often presented in silos. So oftentimes you find that there's no connectivity. So there's no joining of information in an organized manner to help parents determine availability based on potentially unpredictable scheduling changes. So of course, we know that COVID-19, the pandemic, has really upended people's way of life, upended people's schedules. It's just been incredibly difficult to really get ahead in terms of the feeling of routine to which people are accustomed. You want to think about how you can better present information that is relevant to your childcare business as a winning strategy to convincing parents that even, say, if the fall rolls around and things need to be shut down in some measure, that you have contingency plans, and that you have contingency plans that aren't squirreled away somewhere in the corner office of your facility, but that are front and center. So creating an account and vetting approaches, what they mean for you, your credibility, and your business. This flow chart really was created to show you, in addition to this image of this mother, what the process, what the thought process or the decision-making process is like for the majority of parents who use these platforms. As a parent, you first go to the platform or site, you go to sign up or create an account and profile. And if you recall from the demonstration from, I believe it was care.com, there were multiple layers of questioning, which I mentioned. On the one hand, redundancy can be great if you're a childcare provider to ensure that you're getting all the information that's really needed to bring parents to you. But on the other hand, what you couldn't see, because I had already signed up prior, was that there's also a similarly protracted sign-up process depending on what information you want to capture as a parent. So think about this in terms of just behavior. If you were taking a survey or a questionnaire, how many questions, how much information are you willing to give up before you get to the main event, so to speak, before you get the information you need to make a decision, really a decision as to whether you are going to purchase, because ultimately you are involved in these marketing efforts so that you get more sales, you bring in more clients to serve. So parent will sign up or create an account and profile. They're able to then see your profile once they get past the gate, and the gatekeeper is essentially the task of creating the profile. Parents then make judgments about potential providers based on both subjective and incomplete information. So if you remember from Kate C's profile, there was information, several types of information, right, that she possibly could have provided. She could have provided verification of CPR or first aid. There were also reviews, which is a certain type of information, which is something that you always want to see. You want to at least see one review, ideally more, but that is subjective information. As helpful as it often is, it's subjective. So it's not a measure of, did somebody pass, the CPR or first aid course, yes or no. Parents then make a decision. And ultimately, as you can see below, parents also can have too little information to make a hiring decision. Regardless of whether they choose you or they choose, if they don't choose anybody to hire to provide childcare, the parent has made a decision. So what you need to do is figure out how you can make really an unsure or a no to a yes, because you do not want to miss the opportunity to bring in this new business. So ultimately, childcare platforms' target audiences really are parents and families and guardians included in that. But interestingly enough, childcare providers really are the most important part of these marketplaces. Even though as a childcare provider, you need the business, or you would like, but in terms of semantics, you need the business of parents and families to keep you sustainable. Parents and families need your services to be able to work overwhelmingly. Unfortunately, though, these platforms don't necessarily make it easy to get the information that you need as a childcare provider to understand, okay, what are the best tools, what are the best information that I can deploy through my marketing materials to show, X, Y, and Z. I am good at this. We are working on this, etc. So absent that information being explicitly given to you through these platforms, you want to find other ways of sourcing that information. Now, last week and the week prior, I went over quotes provided by parents who took the survey that we sent them about their concerns regarding sending their children back, with COVID-19 on the mind, not exclusively, but in a lot of ways. So what came about from that survey, as well from other information that we were able to obtain just from researching parents' concerns and viewpoints, we've listed really the most compelling of parents' experiences that we hope you can use as a guiding light for your business in terms of how you message your approach to childcare, your strengths, things that you are improving on, etc. So that should also bring to mind, if you participated last week, on your own individual and business SWOT analysis, which to remind you, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So parents with children ages 0 to 6 are far and away the most discerning of parent groups in terms of demographic breakdown. They're newer to parenthood, especially if it's their first child or children, depending on what the situation may be. They can't rely on their child to really effectively communicate if something happens or makes them uncomfortable. And especially now with COVID, at the forefront of many people's thoughts, they can't rely on their child or children to effectively communicate if COVID-19 guidelines are not being followed to the extent recommended. So understanding these things, you can then say to yourself, okay, well, there may be some level of trust that is afforded to me as a child care provider because I have, this record of, demonstrating I have a first aid certification, or I have a license, or I'm registered, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what else proactively can I do? What information can I articulate through my social media presence, through flyers, et cetera, email, et cetera? Location matters. Now, without getting into really the nitty and gritty of it, location, just like in real estate, location is a critical concern of many parents. I will tell you, having grown up in New York City, everybody knew that location mattered in one sense, but in another sense of it, it didn't matter as much as people thought it would, provided that you could say, okay, we may be located in an area that's had, in terms of COVID, an outbreak over the last couple of weeks. That may be the case. But this is how we are approaching this particular threat, to use that term. These are the processes we have in place. These are the procedures. If it's a matter of being in an area with an uptick of crime compared to other areas, Parents can and do get over that on a daily basis because, to use the term, it is what it is. You just have to, as appropriate, acknowledge it and say, we have these things that we offer. These are our strengths. These are things that we are working on, etc. So whether it's related to COVID, whether it's related to property crime, etc., these are things that you do not want to shy away from in terms of pretending that they do not exist, because they exist very much in parents' minds. And the worst thing you can do is not have a plan to explain how you are going to do the best job possible of preserving the health and well-being of the children in your care currently, or those you would like to be in your care. So ultimately, an assessment of what your location means for your business should include current events. As I alluded to, in the greater Rochester area, there have been a couple of noteworthy, as far as garnering media attention, cases of establishments that have seen an uptick in COVID cases. So things like that, just so that families are aware, and it never seems as if you are trying to hide information. Now, a point about that before going further, there is a big difference in marketing between putting all of your cards out on the table and, revealing state secrets, so to speak, versus just being transparent, which is a theme that's been going throughout this entire webinar series. You do not have to reveal every single thing that comes to mind. You should just be, as much as you can, transparent and act in good faith when parents ask you these types of questions, even though admittedly these questions can be uncomfortable to answer, at least in a substantive way. Parents are also concerned with ensuring that you have a census, a regular census that's taken of all people with access to your space. All individuals with access to your space must be cleared, and situational awareness is critical. So whether you're talking about this being as a matter of safety from individuals who are not authorized to be in children's presence just because of physical safety reasons, or whether you're talking about it in the sense that is most applicable to guidelines regarding COVID, you need to have a census of some sort, which you already likely have, but you always want to make sure that, especially in instances like this, you do an assessment of whether they still work and how they can be improved. As mentioned last week when we went over the various risk assessment strategies, looking at the guidelines provided by New York State, for instance, to read between the lines and to see, okay, I think the example that I gave last week was relative to exit points. Don't quote me, but I believe it was relative to exit points and whether children could easily get outside. And I said, well, think beyond that. Obviously, you follow the guidelines, but what additional layer of consideration can you give based on current events, based on the behavior of the children, et cetera, so you can ensure a more layered approach to preserve their safety and well-being. And then think like an insurer to ultimately de-risk your operations. Now, as far as effectively conveying your public health and safety conscious differentiators, your approach to vetting should really be about integrating parents and childcare providers, your considerations. The name of the game is to de-risk as much as possible. And you could do this for yourself to de-risk your operations. So 1, are you licensed or are you registered? Now, several years ago, if you had asked me or if you had told me that I could look up pretty much all the information that I needed to look up about a potential or a current, childcare provider, especially if it was a daycare center, et cetera, I would have said, no way, where can I find that information? A lot of parents were like that. Many parents are still grappling with this disconnect of information, but increasingly more parents are learning that they can turn to various state-based resources to find out this information. So if they are able to find out this information, and if they are changing or adapting their behavior as consumers to find this information, you definitely want to make sure you have this information. So much like with the stock market, for anybody, you know, who looks at the stock market just to see what's going on, when COVID really came on the scene, a lot of people were not doing too well in terms of their emotional well-being because they kept on looking at what was going on with the stock market. I use that analogy to say, even though this particular website updates every 24 hours, it's likely not necessary to check on it every single day. If you make you know, a plan to consult it on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, that may very well be sufficient. But the point of this is to say, just as parents are looking up information potentially about you and your competitors, you want to make sure that you have that same bit of information at your disposal. And thank you. Liz mentioned, and I can't see when she mentioned it a while ago, so I'm sorry, Liz, that I didn't see this earlier. New York State has implemented comprehensive background checks for regulated programs. It started in September 2019. It was a great move forward toward accountability with safety. Absolutely. So I think it was last week when I mentioned going to the various websites to see, you know, very easily what amendments to current legislation, to current guidelines, to current directives, et cetera, exist. And one of those were, you know, these bolstering of background checks that came into play in September. So thank you for that. So really quickly, I'm going to go through this by a show of yes or no, perhaps in the chat box. Who is familiar with this site? And when I say familiar, I specifically mean who consults this site at least once a month as a part of their business. And if you are not a childcare provider, if you have, if you are a, you know, if you have another role such as parent or such as government official or whatever it may be, would you say that you consult this site once a month or not? For anybody who wants to answer. And I won't push my luck in case there are people who are just laying back to hear everything. Okay. So bottom line is you need to be checking this site, especially if you are a childcare provider. One of the things I will note, some childcare platforms, while they will provide the opportunity, typically at an added cost, for parents to run background checks, because they are not continuous background checks as offered by websites, software, web apps like Checker, which is spelled CHECKR. Because that does not happen, parents and sites, platforms typically don't get alerted to changes in status. So that's where New York State's website is so critically important and so crucial to you understanding your positioning, not only for your own business needs, but in comparison to your competitors. So you could click on programs that are found to be operating without the required license or registration. You could also easily find programs that are licensed or registered, but subject to enforcement action. Now, being mindful that this is being recorded, I personally see no need to dig into the particulars of business owners at this time. You could certainly do that on your own just to get a lay of the land and to see if you are indeed listed here, if you have license or registration, what the status of your business is. In conversation with childcare providers over the last few months, it became increasingly clear to me that not everybody really knows the breakdown of this information in terms of how it looks on the website. And so you want to find out that information, you want to catalog it, you want to be able to notate whether you had improvements in terms of your compliance record, et cetera, because all of that information, even if you have dings on your record, presuming that they are not serious or egregious issues, can be reframed as wins towards your ability to improve. So criminal history, and then of course, sex offender registry. So coupled with knowing your own information, so information that's internal to your operations, your business, you also most definitely want to know information regarding sex offenders in your area on a regular basis. And that's as a means of being able to understand the positioning geographically of your business in terms of who's around it, who you know, is in the community perhaps, which for obvious reasons you want to know because you want to be able to de-risk your operations and actually be able to express that. Now, as I've said before, please don't run off and say, oh, Yasmin told me that I should know where all the sex offender, you know, registrants are for my marketing materials. I said no such thing. You do want and need to know as a matter of de-risking your business, not only because that's the right thing to do, it's the sensible thing to do, but also because as far as your marketing materials, you can provide honest information to say, we have these processes in place to ensure that your child is safe and secure. We not only follow the latest you know, CDC and health department guidelines relative to COVID, but we also layer that approach with doing constant assessments of our community, the different resources we have at our disposal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So parents know very quickly and very early on who they are dealing with in terms of your capacity to provide a comprehensive assessment of the ways that you stand above the rest and the ways that you can provide services that are enduring to them. So this is definitely a site, a resource that you want to look at. You don't necessarily really need to know the particulars. It depends on how much information you want. Admittedly, this is a difficult database to go through for obvious reasons, but difficult or not, you need this information. And you want to see relative to the map functionality here where individuals may be in your area. So you just want to, as I mentioned, as a parent speaking, you always want to find confirmation of business licensure or registration with the appropriate licensing authority. So that's something that parents look at increasingly. It's something that you don't want to have any gotcha moments, to use that term, where you find out, you know, something about your business that perhaps you should have known or you did know, but you didn't necessarily think that everybody else could see as well. This website is regularly updated, and by regularly I mean on a daily basis. And so you always want to be ahead of any information. So in terms of vetting process steps, and of course this is vetting for you, because before you can in good faith put your services out there continuously and market for yourself, you have to feel comfortable that you are doing the best you can to shine a light on your strengths. And so for this portion of it, I'm going to go just look at a couple of reviews and break them down so that you can see the types of considerations that come into play for parents, but also the ways that you want to use language to combat any of these viewpoints if they may arise. So this is a glowing review. It's a 5-star review. You can't get any better than 5 stars. So this parent says, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, my son is a busy, active, wiggly little guy who has trouble sitting still during circle time, and he often demands justification for why he has to sit still, etc. Despite these challenges, the teachers at JLU have been patient, optimistic, and encouraging. He truly feels loved and cared for, and I love bringing him. Because he is so loved, he has grown emotionally and is on his way to being a strong student. So the parent goes on and on, right? It's incredibly laudatory. So it's a fantastic review. These are the types of things that you include in your marketing collateral and your materials. So not only on Facebook or other social media through reviews that people actually leave, but in terms of snippets of reviews that you actually have front and center on your homepage as either a pop-up on your homepage, depending on what type of web host or website you use, whether it's a Squarespace, which allows you to easily put together very visually appealing pop-ups. You could have as your pop-up, your most recent glowing recommendation or testimonial. And you can target it specific to what you are doing or what you have implemented relative to COVID-19. So taking the information from the previous webinar about how you are de-risking your operations, how you are following not only guidelines, but showing how you're doing that relative to your unique facility, have that as a pop-up to immediately engage people when they go to your site. If you don't already have a site, please get one. If you don't know how to get one that's visually appealing, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will help you set one up in less than an hour because it is crucial. More than 80% of parents will not make a hiring decision without a website and without information to comb through. So it's critically important that you do that. Now, I'm actually going to skip over that for the reason that I mentioned before, since originally this was going to be in person. But the same way that you have glowing recommendations, you also have not so glowing recommendations. And you want to make sure that you don't just run with the glowing recommendations. In many instances, the negative, or the negative reviews rather, are more illuminating and more impactful on parents, whether they hire you or continue to retain you, than the glowing recommendations. So whatever poor reviews that you may have had, whether it was because of something legitimate that you can own up to, or whether it was just a disgruntled former client and their family, you want to get ahead of it and you want to acknowledge it. So if there's truth to it, there is nothing against, and it's actually recommended in certain ways to say, yes, I acknowledge X, Y, and Z, and this is what we've done to improve. Oftentimes you will see this approach on Yelp, which are the types of reviews that I demonstrated just this last time and the one that I skipped over right now. But on Yelp and on Facebook, increasingly, you see that the approach to more impactful marketing, is certainly in terms of outcomes, is to acknowledge when you've perhaps made an error or when there was just some issue that didn't go as intended, and then demonstrate not only your plan to do better, but proof that you've done better. Okay, so I already discussed that. Continuous background checks, as I mentioned, are really, I wouldn't say cutting edge because they've been around for a couple of years now, but they are becoming less expensive, and depending on what your financial situation is, they are worth looking into because you can get that information very quickly. Okay. So as I mentioned before, you want to integrate your vetting process and your internalization of parents' concerns. Now, a return to webinar 2 in terms of assessing your current operations with regard to clients and families and what they are thinking. These are some of the quotes that I had gone over last week, but now I'm going to go over specifically the ways that you use this for your marketing collateral if you were businesses to which these considerations were being brought to you. And even though these considerations or viewpoints are not from your own clients or prospective clients, these are representative to a certain degree of what parents are thinking. And so you can take the approach of just addressing these in your marketing collateral. So the first parent indicated that they were worried whether the adults would consistently wear masks, whether they would take time off if feeling sick, and limit unnecessary contact with each other and children. So for this, you could have, whether you have an Instagram account or a Facebook account, my suggestion would be to have methodical posts that are theme-based rather than some posts which oftentimes don't have a lot of substance. They're just pictures with your logo or your name on it. It doesn't really provide any information. So you can have a theme-based approach where you say for the next 4 weeks or the next 3 weeks, or the next 6 weeks in the run up to the first day of school in the fall. This is our approach to health and wellness. We provide you with video monitoring so you can see just how well we are doing with wearing our masks among staff. You can see, you can be rest assured that we have strong rapport with our staff, with our personnel, to feel confident that they are doing the right thing by not coming in if they are sick. That said, we also do temperature checks, and we provide no ask, as I had mentioned last week. You just have these resources on your website, no ask financial resources. So if staff are worried about these issues, they can rest assured through certain programs, etc., so that they can do the best job of keeping everybody healthy by staying home if they feel unwell. For the parents who are worried that their children won't be able to adapt as well as they would like by no longer being with them only as things reopen, you can incorporate socialization activities that help children adapt to circumstance through play. So an example is a compliment circle. I'm not sure if everybody has heard of them, but a compliment circle is pretty much what it sounds like. You get kids in a circle, physically distanced, right? At least 6 feet away, and you go through different parts of the current day or the previous day or just in general, and you get kids in an age-appropriate way to share compliments about their peers. And in doing that, you not only establish a culture of kindness, but you also establish a recall of memories of how their peers have been able to help them adjust to these circumstances. So these are ways that you can really stand above the rest in showing not only your chops with respect to complying, to use that term, with guidelines, adapting your activities for the health and well-being benefits of the children in your care. With regard to cleanliness, one of your social media posts, as well as just a focal part of your website, should be or could be a list of products you use to do your cleaning relative to COVID-19. So if you were not with us last week, one of the resources that was provided was a link to a page on the Environmental Protection Agency's website that allows for you to comb through their database of cleaning solutions on account of whether it's for home, it's for business or office, if it's for mixed use, and you could play with different filters so you can get a list that is relevant to your particular set of circumstances. So that type of information. And then finally, you can have COVID-19 specific policies and procedures, which I had mentioned previously, which is password protected and accessible to clients. Back to the mention of, don't spill all of your state secrets. Maintain as much of your intellectual property, to use that term, if you have any, or just the things that make you great in terms of information. Keep that to the chest, close to the chest in certain respects, but then also share it as appropriate. So there are certain things that really the people who deserve the benefit of that information are the people who are clients of yours. And so you can create like a password protected page, whether you are on a Squarespace or, a WordPress, etc., that has that specific information for clients and client families. And you can designate somebody to routinely update that information. And by routine, of course, you all are busy, but I would say no more than 2 weeks, at least with respect to, the phases that we're in. Update that so that any time a family, a client family needs or wants to find information or, refresh their memory of something, they can get access to it without having the friction, to use that term, of having to reach out to you via email or text, et cetera, which just adds on more administrative work for everybody. Okay, so demonstrate not only what you do and how you do it, but your continuous activities and plans to improve. So you want to take clients and prospective clients on a visual journey of your future plans, and you want to prominently provide testimonials. So you want to lay out planned milestones and what they mean for the families you serve and or hope to serve. So again, from the survey that we sent out and from supplemental research that we conducted, it was clear that just as with many other types of relationships in people's lives, parents are looking for more than just somebody or people to watch their children. They are really looking for and hoping to find people that they trust with the care of their children, not only now, but for the foreseeable future, depending on how old or how young a child is when they first come into your care. If you are establishing relationships with parents when they are, just a few weeks or months old, and you're likely going to have them on a daily basis until they get to their, school, K through 12 years, that's 5 to 6, maximum perhaps, years of relationship. And so it stands to reason, and parents have expressed this, that if there's something that you're planning for your business that will impact them, especially if it's something that they can get on board with and help you with to be more sustainable, which is a mutual benefit to both parties, then articulate that. And there are a few better ways of articulating that than to show really a strategy of how you see the future. Everybody knows those questions when you're going on a job interview of, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? You should be doing the exact same thing and actually have a visual representation of what you are currently doing that is, to use the term, awesome. And the things that you are doing to become even more awesome, to improve your facility, to improve your staffing, to improve whatever. Set them up as milestones that parents can see. I guarantee you that you will be viewed in a much greater light than the vast majority of providers that don't take that long-term approach to really saying, okay, we're not only here to watch, to care for children. We're here really to build a brighter future for all of us. And this is how we can do it. So on the one hand, this marketing tactic demonstrates that you are not only focused on short-term gains, but also long-term gains, as it is relevant not only for your business, but for the families you serve or could serve. Sorry about this. Okay. So community networks and entrepreneurial service providers. There are just a few that I'm focusing on for right now. I think many of them I had mentioned maybe in workshop 1 or webinar 1, but I'm going to come back to them. So of course, Pathstone. Pathstone has Small Business Friday Forum. So if you are not familiar with it, or if you've seen it but you haven't participated, it's a really great opportunity to use the term kickback. Okay, it's a laid back, casual, substantive opportunity to speak with other business owners, not exclusively childcare providers, of course, but other business owners, to really go over timely topics, grievances, issues, to get everybody's collective, you know, mental power flowing to figure out strategies and approaches for people to do better. So I would strongly encourage you to attend those forums that are held every Friday, not only to get good information, but also as a means of networking, of establishing your presence, getting your name brand recognition out there. Everybody in some form, fashion, or way either needs childcare or knows somebody who not only needs it, but desperately needs it. And so you want to go to those forums to have the opportunity to really speak with people who can get your information out there. I would suggest doing so first, just as a means of getting to know the people who participate and the flow of information, but then also asking if those who are in attendance would be interested in doing cross promotion of services. So whether somebody else is involved in a space or an industry that may be relevant to your business or not, they could still provide that word of mouth marketing for you that is often critically important to not only bringing on new business, but retaining clients. So Passstone has an e-newsletter. You can reach out to them and see if there's any way that you can get information out to the community. Depending on what they say, if there is an opportunity for that, great. If there may be ways that can be done through partners, through consultants, etc., that work with Passstone, find out that information too, because you always want to be thinking in terms of your marketing approach as one that should be driven by social networks, by the fact that you should not be relying solely on social media posts or on emails, but you should be relying on individuals. And Passstone has extensive reach to help you accomplish that. And you already have now established, if you didn't work with them previously, this relationship by having attended at least one of these webinars in this series. So inquire not only for Passstone, but for anybody to see if partnering organizations are permitted to help you advertise. Some are able to do that, others are not, depending on the particulars of any restrictions on monies that they receive, etc. But still, you don't want to leave any questions like these unasked, because if you can in fact do that, it makes it a much more efficient process for you to get word of your business out there. And then again, not specific necessarily to Passstone, but offer a promotion or a trial so decision makers can better understand what you're offering and how you differentiate yourself and your business. So you may be thinking, on the one hand, I have a daycare center. What do you mean a trial? Or I do in-home childcare. What do you mean a promotion, right? What I mean is, one should always be thinking innovatively, but especially now, there's so many chances and so many opportunities to innovate on things that need attention. So for instance, as I mentioned before, with regard to childcare platforms that still present information to an extent in silos, you could see if there is a way, and I believe one of the attendees today has brought this up for consideration in other venues, but you should play with different ideas and see if there's a way to do, round robin care, so to speak, of childcare facilities, so that if businesses are struggling, if they don't look sustainable, whatever, etc., you could find ways of doing cooperative economics. There are a number of studies that have been done towards this. There are a couple of insights, at least, that I know individuals within the city of Rochester can speak to. Lomax Campbell, for one, is what I would call a subject matter expert on cooperative economics and how childcare providers actually can, you know, come together to innovate new ways of doing things that abide by all state laws, all CDC, et cetera, guidelines, but also innovate on ways that typically would leave people out of opportunities to have their children watched and cared for in a safe and affordable environment. So things like that. So innovation is key, and see if there are any partner, you know, organizations, either to Passstone or Passstone itself, that would be interested in at least doing the initial legwork to see if maybe an idea that you have, however, you know, potentially crazy or off the wall you may think it is, if it would actually have any possible feasibility or legs. RIT Center for Urban Entrepreneurship. You could send your service offerings, you know, to Q regarding the possibility of having flyers placed at their front reception desk for dissemination. So, full disclosure, I previously and happily, very happily, worked at RIT Center for Urban Entrepreneurship for just a little over 3 years. And oftentimes, I would say more times than not, when people would come in to Q for, you know, any number of workshops, seminars, et cetera, that are typically held in the large conference room, you have to pass by the front reception desk. And increasingly, there were many flyers and business cards placed there for the purpose that you could probably imagine. That's an opportunity. That is a no-cost opportunity to not only get your information out there, but also to find, you know, a way to achieve two things at once, which is to get your marketing materials in a high traffic area, and to also get no cost business counseling services from the individuals at Q, including principally program manager Sylvia Okoye. Okay. U.S. Small Business Administration, particularly if you're in the Rochester area, the Rochester branch, if you're in another area, whatever your local branch is. Inquire with your local branch about how they can help you advertise your services. And this is really something that you're going to need to speak to, you know, the local individuals at your branch about, because every branch is different, but everyone is also very willing to help you, because they want to be able to ensure that your business, especially as a childcare business, is getting its needs met so that you are sustainable, and so that the needs of not only childcare providers, but of families, roughly 40% of whom have minor children in the United States, can actually get to work and really help sustain the economy. So you want to speak with them. Again, perhaps you can leave flyers, business cards, etc., in their lobby or their waiting room. If they have an e-newsletter that you can be a part of, and you can do that in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce. So the Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, has a lot of nifty tools that they have really bolstered their own marketing and advertising for over the last few months. So they have, among other things, a number of virtual events, and at some point, you know, in the future, in-person events when appropriate. But these events are perfect for networking and to develop name brand recognition. Again, oftentimes, ironically enough, childcare providers don't get enough attention because, at least I would say, because it's so common to our experience that, yeah, I have a childcare provider, you have a childcare provider, or, you know, everybody or most people need childcare. But at the same time, because it's perceived as so, you know, common or ubiquitous, that's precisely the reason why there should be more attention paid to it, to ensure that you all are doing as well as possible. And so one of the avenues to ensure that you really get your name out there, so that you make the connections necessary not only for your business as an individual business, but also as a means of advocacy for the issues that are important to you, perhaps legislation that's important to you, is ensuring that you are aligned with the activities put forth by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Relative to them, you want to think back on your differentiators. What are you doing that is extraordinary? There is at least something that you are doing that is extraordinary. And if you want to challenge me on it, I'm happy to speak with you, and go over what you have going on and break down what you can use to your advantage. What mutual benefit is there with the Chamber of Commerce? So if you are not familiar with their website, go on today and see the different offerings they have. It's very sleek. Their focus really is on digital marketing and on social media marketing. And there are people who, are accessible. So that is something to not only consider, but to follow up and to do. Review their current initiatives and see where you fit in. Again, there are a ton of opportunities right now to get your name out there. It's just a matter of picking what suits you best. Promise Venture Studio, as I mentioned before, reach out to them if you already haven't. They have routine virtual events. They have academies, to use that term, so you can learn about not only funding opportunities for childcare providers who are doing something that is innovative, right? An emphasis on innovation, but they also provide what they call show and tells, where you get to understand different approaches from early childhood educators and childcare providers that are doing things in incredibly beneficial and new ways that are creating powerful, positive outcomes for families and the financial sustainability of childcare providers. So check them out as well. So ultimately, in focus, the benefits of membership and subscription to childcare platforms. Again, when I started this, I mentioned to you that overwhelmingly, even for any gaps that can be addressed or issues that can be addressed with childcare platforms, millions upon millions of working parents use these platforms as a means of quickly finding out information about childcare providers. You want to the degree possible, use that to your advantage to make life easier on you. Certainly, you don't want to add more administrative work to your plate if you can avoid it. For providers, you want to keep in mind that it's a centralized online location for providers to find parents in search of care providers. So you don't have to do all of the added work of going to a ton of events where parents may be and handing out your flyers. You want to take a passive approach. Typically, the word passive is not viewed too well, but in this case, you want to take the passive approach to do things as efficiently as possible. So you want to be able to go to these platforms, see which ones are the best for your purposes, and if you feel so compelled, create profiles or listings on them. It means a decreased time investment needed to market your services to parents. Not only time, but also dollar cost. For parents, it's one and the same, just on the flip side. And for community members, by going on to childcare platforms and seeing what's available, you could also see what's not available. And you can better identify gaps in services that may be solved more easily by the marketplace, so to speak, by small business owners, by childcare providers on their own. But there are also ways that you can see where those gaps need to be really addressed by improvements through public and private partnerships. Calculating your business's ROI of paid childcare platforms. So obviously, we all know that perhaps one of the best ways of getting clients or customers is through word of mouth. Good word of mouth, right? Because some word of mouth you don't want, but good word of mouth. There's the social media driven approach. And what we are advocating in this webinar is for a hybrid approach where word of mouth encompasses the passive nature of creating relationships with partners who can help you and who can provide you with business counsel, business services, perhaps even business financing, but then who could also let you leave flyers or let you leave business cards, etc., or rack cards in their foyers or in their lobbies, etc., for dissemination. There's also the social media approach, right? Where you have the efficiency of the internet that not only works for you, but works for parents. So it's a win-win. So collectively or together, that hybrid approach is what you should be aiming for. You want to optimize your strengths by engaging parents when they are most primed for communication. This is whether it's word of mouth, social media driven, or the hybrid approach. But ultimately, you can't do this out of thin air. Now, if you have data, if you have survey data, or even if you just have like a MailChimp or a constant contact account and you already send out e-newsletters to people on your distribution list and your listserv among current clients and maybe prospective clients, that's great. But if you don't know when the best times to reach out to them are, it's not going to make a dent in what you really need to accomplish. So familiarize yourself with tools such as Sprout Social, which is a really great social media organization tool. Familiarize yourself with the changing behavior of consumers, the changing behavior in particular of parents in terms of when you should do or post various, posts based on, the social media channels. So is it Facebook, is it Instagram, is it LinkedIn, et cetera, whatever the case may be. Don't shy away from platforms, social media platforms specifically, that you may not have a lot of familiarity with. So while all of you likely have at least a LinkedIn profile, you may not have previously put forth LinkedIn ads for your childcare services. But ask yourselves why. Depending on the demographics that you serve, if you are overwhelmingly providing your services to parents who work, then you need to be reaching them when they're most primed to get information, when they're most primed to figure out, okay, how do I get childcare sorted for this upcoming school year or whatever the case may be. So whereas Facebook is used by many, not as many childcare providers, to their detriment, use LinkedIn and highly targeted ads that are specific to the behaviors of parents that either they serve or they would like to serve. So that is something that you should be looking at as well. You want to be looking at not only the engagement levels with respect to individual platforms, but the types of posting, the types of language that is most likely to have your posts more visible and more. So I would consult this. This is updated on an annual basis, and this one is for 2020. And as you can see here, they have an update specific to COVID-19 changes to social media. So that is it for today. We ended pretty much right on schedule because we started about a minute or two late. Next week is the final webinar, and that will be on putting together your advisory council. Because even if you are not a Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatnot, every business owner should have some type of advisor or advisory council to help them move forward on their business journey. And childcare providers, in particular, we are seeking to help be connected with individuals that are relevant to better understanding your accounting needs, better understanding and implementing social media strategies, etc. So we will have individuals who have signed up to be pro bono, to use that term, advisors who are not only for helping small business owners in general, but helping childcare providers specifically, because you are a critically important part of society and our ability to get things done.
Thank you so much for all your help and all the information.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if there are any questions that you would like to ask, but not perhaps in this public forum of sorts, feel free to email me as noted on the screen. And have a great rest of your day, everybody.